and welcome to the first episode of the stupendously poorly produced series, What's the Deal with Vouchers? The question we're going to start with is the government allowed to send public dollars to private schools in the first place? Is this policy even legal? Um, this is something that I really struggled with when I first heard the concept because it just doesn't sound right intuitively that could happen. But the answer is yes. Actually, the government does things like this all the time. There's certainly precedent for the government to use taxpayer funds to outsource a function to a private entity. So, for example, sometimes the government contracts with private providers to run prisons or to carry out road construction projects. There's all kinds of things where a government doesn't necessarily have the staff and the equipment and the expertise to do something itself, and so they will use public funding to contract that out. That's pretty normal. There's also precedent for a government to put taxpayer funds in the hands of individuals to spend, which is what is being proposed through this education savings account idea. Many of us enjoyed that in the form of economic impact payments during the pandemic. There's also a long-standing federal program called Temporary Assistance for Needy Families that gives low-income families some cash that they can spend on basic living expenses. There are tons of tax credits and deductions built into income tax policy that have similar effect. So it's not that wild for the government to consider creating these accounts where they're sending public funds for families to spend on educational expenses. But even when the government delegates work and decision-making to another entity, the government still holds the ultimate responsibility to make sure the work is being carried out effectively and as intended. And in the case of education, our state government here in Texas actually has a constitutional responsibility to educate or provide an educational opportunity to the entire population and to do that for free. So if you want to look it up, Article 7 of our state constitution is where you want to go. It opens up with this statement. A general diffusion of knowledge being essential to the preservation of the liberties and rights of the people. Sorry, I'm just reading this. I know it's so boring to listen to. It shall be the duty of the legislature of the state to establish and make suitable provision for the support and maintenance of an efficient system of public free schools. So that's a pretty clear statement of the state's responsibility to both provide for a general diffusion of knowledge across Texas and to do that by providing for a system of public schools that are free to the students and their families. What's interesting here is this is not framed primarily as a service to individuals. It's intended to be a public good. So the priority is not making sure that each of us personally has access to an education that covers exactly the content we want it to in the way we want it covered so that we personally can benefit. The priority is making sure the general population is equipped to exist together as a society. It's essential to the preservation of the liberties and rights of the people. That's the rationale that's used. So like when I read back over that, getting ready for these videos, that was like a really good reminder for me, because even I personally think about, like, oh, the main reason the government provides for our education is because it will help prepare us for good jobs, and then we will contribute to the economy and to the tax base. I mean, that's true too. That is part of the public good concept. But when our founding fathers first put this together, their primary concern was preserving our democracy. So food for thought there. Okay, so the question is not, can the state of Texas establish education savings accounts? It can. But the question is, can the state of Texas do this in a way that still upholds its constitutional responsibility to provide for the general diffusion of knowledge and to maintain an efficient system of public free schools? Okay, so to answer that question, we got to answer 3 more, and that's going to be the next 3 videos. So we need to have a sense of, one, whether an ESA policy is likely to result in the general diffusion of knowledge. So in other words, is this policy going to be good for students learning? Second question, will the ESA policy impact the state's ability to support and maintain public free schools? So will this policy hurt public schools and make it more difficult for them to do their job? And then foundational to both of those questions is whether the state will actually be able to keep tabs on how the policy plays out and to take action if it's not working as intended. So in other words, will there be accountability not only for how public funds are spent, but also for whether this ESA policy is actually allowing Texas to carry out its constitutional obligations. So those are the three questions that I'll tackle in my next three videos. And after that, we'll turn and just pay attention to some of the rhetoric and arguments that you might hear in this debate. Stay tuned.